Greetings, good people. Welcome to Who Knows It's Just Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for fitting me into your day today. On today's episode, I'm very happy to be joined by Ryan W., who I know from my time at Urban Temple. And yeah, I'm very excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the show. And if you could please say hello and if you could just share how you identify.
All right, peace. So yes, I'm Ryan W. Culturally, I identify as being a Black queer woman who is definitely grounded in her spiritual practices. That there's no separation from that for my identity. But I definitely am somebody who geeks over energy. So as terms of professionalism, I am in the healing arts as well.
I remember you saying, you're an energy practitioner.
Yeah.
I was like, that's dope. I love that description.
Yeah.
I don't know if you still feel that way, but he said it at one point.
Yeah, I think that bottom lines it completely to an energy practitioner. I think sometimes I'm throwing the healing arts too, because a lot of times people do misconstrue it with energy, solar panels or sustainable energy. So people kind of don't know where to go with that all the time. But if I know that the audience is familiar with energy work, then absolutely energy practitioner, because that hits every sector of life too.
Yeah, that's real. Cool. So I know you've heard a couple of episodes, but for those who are listening for maybe the first time, I'll just reiterate that this show is called Who Knows It's Just Life, because at the end of the day, I don't know, I'm still learning, and this show is a public expression of that learning process. So I'm going to say something that I disagree with at some point later in the future. I'll probably say something that listeners disagree with. I may say something that you disagree with. And I welcome you to just be in this space, in this moment, and participate in the learning. And you're welcome to check me if I say something that doesn't sit right with you, and we can have that conversation, because it's literally just a learning space. So I thank you for joining me in this space. And yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to do. Before we get into anything heavy or whatever, I just want to see how you're doing today, how you're doing this week, if you would like to provide any updates about just what you're carrying and bringing into the space.
One, I'm naming that I'm nervous. I know we have these conversations so organically, Kyle, but the microphone is here, the equipment is here. But and then also the art of fluidity. So I'm trying to keep the conversation more fluid.
Yeah.
But getting outside of my head, I feel really good. I feel like I'm ending one phase of life and stepping into a whole new phase, and I'm finally not as jittery or nervous about the newness as I was before.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's what's up. I like that. Maybe we'll get into a little bit of that a little later.
Okay.
All right. So folks who have heard the show before heard me mention The Matrix. Ryan is the person who I mentioned who implored me to rewatch the first three Matrices, and then in anticipation for the fourth one. And so thank you for coercing me into doing that. I was kidding.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you made a hell of a case for why it's necessary. And so I rewatched all three before watching the fourth one. I think you watched the fourth one slightly before me. But so how did you feel about the whole series, but specifically the fourth one, and how's that sitting for you right now?
Yeah, so I think I do have to do the fourth one some justice and go back and rewatch it. I've only watched it once. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of still fresh, but I am definitely one of those who subscribe to the belief that the Matrix saga is a documentary. Period. I want the t-shirt. I'm with Shia with that one. Yeah, for sure. But the thing that gets me the most is how intricate it is, from some of the story development to how it just interweaves the dynamics of the Matrix we live in, and how it still does that thing that Hollywood does sometimes by tucking, quote unquote, the truth into a story, more specifically a love saga. But I think that is kind of speaking to eye level of where society is to kind of get the audience kind of bought in. But I do think it's also interesting how it gets people on different levels. You know, if some people just want to watch for entertainment purposes, then I think there's the entertainment factor there. It's a lot going on that keep people kind of into it. But majority, what got me like, we have to watch this is because of the work that we were doing with Urban Simple and like
Right.
the work, then how the passion that we have with like pushing society towards transformation. Like in order to do that, you have to scrutinize society on levels, and the Matrix does that. It has this underlying tone of if you know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been doing your homework, you're hip. If not, then this might plant the seed for you to get curious, and then going down the rabbit hole.
Right.
Follow the white rabbit. So yeah, I'm here for the Matrix. I can't get enough of it. And then it's also nostalgic, you know.
Yeah, we went nostalgic just watching the old ones again.
Oh, watching okay. So there's another layer. They did that. Like rewatching the first 3 was nostalgic just because of the times when they came out originally, and then just to like see like wow, like we really thought that movie was advanced, advanced, and then to take it back to like 2000, like with the Y2K is scared, like.
Yeah.
So just rewatching it was nostalgic because it just threw me back into that time when I was growing up. But then the way that they tried to keep the integrity of the other 3, you know, with the 4th one.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like. So I agree. I also thought that it was a really brilliant film, and I share your. I think I share your sentiments in terms of like how Hollywood plays with our hearts and our imaginations, but also our sense of right and wrong. Like it resonates because like in the first one when they said like the human race is a virus, it's like I was like, 13 and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like so, but we haven't changed society to correct that. But the movie tells us the truth, and it's just a weird tease of like reality mixed with like but go on about your life. And I that's looking back at all of that is why I really love how they did with the 4th one. It was premised based on Neo being a game designer, and the game was The Matrix.
Yep.
And so it's literally what Hollywood does to us. And if you allow that extrapolation, in The Matrix, they use The Matrix as a distraction from The Matrix.
Yes.
And it's like, I feel like that's that's ingenious, but that's also what's happening to a degree. And so... Yeah, but I also want to mention that you said that it was a love saga. And when I rewatched the first 3, I realized, oh, this is a love story.
Yeah.
And then the 4th one kind of just adds to that. And it really, I guess the younger me didn't tap into that part of it, I guess. And just like you said, like the entertainment value and just the mind gymnastics that the plot gets you through. But the fact that it's a love saga is interesting, and I think it adds a special appeal to it, and it speaks to the fact that we're loving, emotional beings, and that is a driving factor in our decision making. So anybody that looks at us like, oh, well, in the economy, you should make a wise decision about your purchases and blah blah blah. That's bull, because we're emotional beings, and we're motivated by aesthetic and energy, and we're just way more complicated than logic.
Yeah.
So
I think we may have to put a pin in that, maybe jumping the gun a little bit. But to your point about this whole love saga, I think, let me back up a little bit. When I first watched it when I was younger, the underlying theme that resonated with me most, because again, I saw the love part of it, but it didn't feel like heavy on the love part. It was really like something is hidden. And I was just like, okay, so it made me, even young, I was like, okay, so it implanted the seed that society needed to be scrutinized. And I just, that's one thing I knew. Like, is he the one? Is he not the one? And why does he want to be the one? And why do they want him to be the one? Like, I remember going off of that. But then also being like, oh, Neo did save Trinity. And, that's one thing, like, I have been victim or have fallen victim to being a helpless romantic and the conditions of like being a woman in society and stuff. So that is something that we're like, that really got me like, okay, we want a Neo. Like he's the one because he's saving it all or something like that too. But And that's just a basic framework. Now, mind you, for in context, I was like in 6th grade when the first one came out too, and fell in love with it then. But okay, so this whole idea of it being a love saga, though, when I rewatched it recently, I'm like, this is love in such a deep level, like not even just for like another person, but the inner. I've never seen the fight for love like that in a male figure, being like with Neo having to make the choice of saving Trinity or saving like essentially all of humanity. And
yeah, because they put those opposed to each other.
They put those opposed to each other, and he had to literally make a choice, and he chose Trinity. And like usually what we see in these love sagas is the man feeling real gallant and like walking away with this bravado from like saving a whole nation or whatever, and then the woman falls in love with him because of his ability to like be the ultimate warrior.
Right. Every other movie ever,
you know, or like the woman is like a distraction or something, you know, and like it could be argued that maybe Trinity was a distraction, but then in the fourth one, it's kind of like gives like some kind of soulmate, now I won't say soulmate, like twin flame, like type of
twin flame.
Yeah.
See, you're like 10 minutes in and you already
I'm sorry.
Nah, that's beautiful. Keep it. Yeah.
I did preface that by saying that I might be jumping the gun.
No, that's beautiful. The twin flame. Yeah, that's that's really true. And that makes sense too, because when the not the Oracle, the architect was talking about the recasting of the Matrix after the third movie, they had to have them physically close together, because if they had to play around and failed multiple times in terms of how to position them and all that kind of stuff in the Matrix. So like that whole twin flame thing is really real, and that was a physical and an energy thing in the physical. Yeah. So,
the play on time, like, because when we talk about like twin flame relationships, it goes into like evolutionary astrology type of thing, you know, and we're talking about, I mean, there's different places we can go with destiny and whatnot, and different places we can go through evolutionary astrology, and how we keep finding each other until we figured out how to make it work. But for this story, I just loved it so much because they played with the character development in the sense where Neo was like, she believed in me, that I was the one. Now it's my turn to believe in her. And so, and you know, and so like that just to me was just like, this is like some like powerful energy that's just beyond love. Like they've taken it to more etheric levels with this.
Yeah. Like, I mean, is it helpful? Is it accurate to say kind of it's like a reiteration of like the yin and yang, like that type? Yeah. Okay.
Like I think that the way that because the relationship was tested, you know, obviously more than once. But
he saw her with a husband.
Okay. Right. And which was part of the Matrix too, because she was like, you maybe have kids, like, but. Like this is like we have kids. We're bringing children into it. Something I forgot exactly verbatim what she said, but yeah, I think the yin and yang balance and how much you see that this defies just like choice and logical reasoning. You know, it's not just oh my gosh, like I want somebody here, or like I need love, or like I want to just love, and now this is the person for the sake of it. Like Neo had to have some ultimate trust. Like they were like, it has to be her choice, and he didn't. His approach was super simple, you know. Like he was willing to walk away. Like for a second, I mean, it was a little predictable, but
you knew it wasn't going.
Yeah, but still, just the fact that that was the action that was taken. He didn't try to convince her, didn't try to sway her, didn't try to like, here's all the cards. He just gave it to her succinctly, you know, and let it be her choice. And it's still that pull, you know, with all these options here, without having to be convinced, without having to compromise who you are, you know. You just gravitated towards each other, and there's this their force, like that playing with like when they're together, the kind of force that they are. I think can be a love saga, but so much more. Like the highest expression of love, you know, in partnership.
And so I guess I'm curious what you think about the dichotomy that was portrayed to him in the third one. Like you can either save her or save the world. Yeah. Like, do you think that's a fair choice to have been presented, or do you think that the way society should work is that choosing love is also choosing us as people?
Yeah, where we are as humans right now, it does feel like that's the choice. To do the work of quote unquote, saving humanity, or to fall, like, not even head over heels, because that's still basic. Or to really, like, surrender and sacrifice to, like, another half of you, you know, and to fall into love of, like, what it takes to be your ultimate self in that regard. I think so. That's why I think it's leveled. Like you can go high or low with this, right? So I think that choice was so much more than just saving society or saving the love of his life. Like either way, you are in order to be the one with either one of them, you're enmeshing yourself. And so, like to your point, I do think that there is a way to do both. I think it's a fair choice.
Okay.
I think they made him gravitate towards what he would need to do first to, I don't want to say complete himself in the sense that Trinity isn't the completion. It's him coming into that balancing out masculine and feminine within himself, and then that being his relationship with Trinity being the external expression of it before he's powerful enough to save humanity.
I like that.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I do think that is a choice we have to reckon with in physical form.
I'm definitely going to have to watch it again.
Because it goes to the point where what you were saying when we were talking the other day, how you need somebody in your corner, man. You know, like, and that's a lot for me to say because I have prided myself on being independent for a long time, which is another reason why I resonated with Neo when they said, I'm paraphrasing the hell out of it, but basically Neo's character does not like the concept of having his life already mapped out for him. He wanted autonomy and agency,
right?
Only to find out that he had no autonomy or agency.
Right.
He just had choice, you know. Like,
right. All right, yeah. So that it's so funny that we got to that point because I definitely think the whole idea of feminine and masculine energy that's a topic I'm interested in right now. Like I did an episode with my buddy Tony about rediscovering masculinity. So I would love to explore some of those concepts with you. And it's funny that it came up through the Matrix as well, because a lot of that, like the fact that the oracle's a woman, the architect was a man, and just like how that was portrayed, and the idea of just choosing love of your other half in order to give birth and or save humanity. Like that's a beautiful idea, and I love how you captured it that way. You did say something about evolutionary astrology, and I do want you to just briefly describe that for myself and the listeners, just to make sure like I understand what you meant by that.
Yeah, cool. And also let me say, like, I'm still a learner of evolutionary astrology or astrology. Astrology is a whole nother rabbit hole in the whole context of energetics. Let me say that. And that's how I view it. So a lot of people have different angles for astrology. One thing I will say that I'm an advocate of, just promoting that astrology is not just the sun sign. It's not just, hey, what's your sign? Are you compatible? Like, what's up? Like, so I just want to preface that. That's the biggest thing I want to lead with. And that astrology is ancestral technology. Like, it's ancient technology. And whether or not we choose to believe it or not, the forces of the planetary bodies that are in the cosmos are affecting us. Like, period, or else we would not be Earth orbiting in our solar system, this as we know it without it. And so astrology helps us. So now this is my philosophy too. Like, I didn't make the philosophy, but this is how I subscribe and interpret it. In my approach towards it is that the more we know astrology as a mother science and as, again, ancestral technology, the more we invite ease in navigating our human experience in this lifetime, on this physical plane, in this dimension, in the embodiment of like our spirits and whatnot. So we don't have to do it alone. Like
that's really, I love how yeah, that's dope. And this is a very, very simple, tangible example of that happened in my life. One of my mentors did like to know, and she did focus on sun signs, but the application was in professional environments, like, okay, like you're a Taurus, like da 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 da, like when you come at a certain work question or a certain work conflict or whatever it is, and you come at it in a certain way, if I know your sign, I know your chart, like I know that butting heads with you in this certain way, or approaching you from this perspective won't work because of what we know, because of that ancestral technology. So absolutely, I'm not going to waste my energy, or even just, I'm going to be informed by that technology to in a more healthy and compatible way, like broach the subject, handle the conflict, whatever it is. She might have even been talking about, I mean, people always do the sign chart for like relationships, of course. Yeah. But in work and just really with relationships in general, like you said, it does, like, yeah, you said it should be making things easier. Yeah. And that clicked for me. Yeah.
It's here for us. Like, I think you can apply it to every facet of life because it helps navigate every facet of life, like legitimately. If you harness the energy, you know, and it starts with awareness, starts with being conscious of it, and then practicing applying it. But it really can be so simple as that, and then you can make it nuanced. But because it is nuanced, like, because if you take every living person, they have their own story, they have their own chart, they have their own chemistry, they have their own snapshot of where the sky was when they were born, which is all the birth chart is. And the planets were playing with them and dancing with them and interweaving their energies for each individual person. And so when you look at it like that, then it's like, dag, this person is complicated as hell. But then it also takes the pressure off of you for taking things personal when things don't mesh, for taking full accountability for having to make things right. You know, then you just really like see that they're their own solar system in and of themselves. Now, if I have to work with you, then I can, you know, kind of work with the energies that you possess and embody. And if I want you to work with me, then I would love for you to know those parts too. But oh my gosh, we're so separated and disconnected that we're trying to like jigsaw puzzle our way in, like, does this fit? Does this fit? From our own perspectives, you know, or our egos thinking that we're just the sun, you know, like.
Yeah. And you know, it's I'm also thinking too, with my kiddo, he's 8 and we have a great relationship, but there are certain types of, I guess you could call it conflict. There's certain kinds of, like, certain moments where it's like there's just a rub, and I'm just like, is this a celestial thing? Is this is this just a thing that's just gonna be a thing? Yeah. And so I guess that's me, you know, operating in ignorance of that, and maybe I need to be tapping a little bit more into that technology to be like, you know, how could I better approach him, and how can I better represent myself, or better just there's probably an easier way to navigate this.
Yeah. So now we're getting more into evolutionary astrology, whereas before I was using astrology more of as like a broad umbrella term, but you're getting towards evolutionary astrology in one sense of knowing it, when you're saying, hey, we can do better here, you know, so we can evolve. So like, I definitely do not think that astrology, like, to know somebody's chart, or to know how the planets were playing and somebody like energetically in there when they were born, is not fixed, you know. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of misuse the technology, or a way that we misuse the technology is thinking like, okay, you're an Aries, so you're gonna be headstrong, you're gonna run hot. Like,
no, I'm not.
Right? You're gonna be in constant conflict or looking for the battle. Like, no, like that might be something that you know, experience, but that doesn't mean that that's how you have to be, you know? So like, but the point of knowing this is to evolve. And so that gets into evolutionary astrology. So the more you know about like how Avery is going to just walk naturally in life, the more you can help support him so that he can evolve into the highest version of himself. And in turn, because again, the energy attracts, you know, you have to evolve in yourself, you know,
Right.
or there's going to be a natural separation.
Yeah.
So that's one part of evolutionary astrology, and I'm going to kind of speed it up a little bit. Another part is that we keep evolving, and only on this, like in the 3D, is time a thing. So if we're always evolving, then that's past lives and future lives that are going to constantly have us. Yeah. There's no. Let me say this. There's no stopping the evolution.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say there's no separation.
And there's no separation.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, yeah. So that's how it tied in with the fourth matrix, is that this whole their relationship is meant to evolve, you know, through the generations, through times, just like in everything that's living has a birth chart. So including a nation, you know, like including a country, you know, and so it makes sense when we're talking about the architect designing the Matrix and like these sagas and stuff, like that, it's evolutionary, like human progression through that.
You know, that reminds me. Oh, spoiler alert! We're gonna have spoilers about the Matrix.
I think you gotta say this earlier.
Whoops! I mean, y'all should have seen it already. No, but the idea that back in Zion, like that, or the idea that machines chose to work with humans, like that, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, so just the fact that like things change and things evolve, things and beings, yeah, that just made me think of that. All right, so there's another thing I want to circle back to, which was just the idea of masculine and feminine energy, and that's something that, you know, came up in the movie. I mean, obviously it comes up in everything, movies and everything. So I kind of just want to touch on that because that's a topic that is of interest to me right now. So can we talk a little bit more about that and how that shows up for you, or just in how you see the world and all that?
Yes, please. Yes, please. It's my jam. Well, can I ask what interests you about it? Like,
yeah. So for me, we're in a phase right now where it feels like, you know, the idea of masculinity and femininity are in flux in terms of the expectations and I guess I should speak more specifically in the sense that like the gender identities of man and woman are just in flux, I think, in our at least in the United States, in United Statesian culture. Yeah, like, and so, you know, obviously you got like feminism, stuff like that, and there's a lot of men who are very defensive when you utter the word feminism. There's black women who are like, I'm not a feminist because that doesn't rock with me or whatever. So there's just a lot of layers, a lot of, you know, history. And then, but bringing it back home to me personally, I have a son and I'm a cishet black man, and there are aspects of my identity that are privileged, and I want to, and for my kid, I want to make sure that he's not homophobic, not transphobic, you know, anti-patriarchal, just like not embodying those things. And it's crazy to see him like be open-minded in a way that my generation just wasn't.
Yeah.
But also it's crazy to see how he's learning gender roles, and it's not necessarily from my home or anything, but it's just baked in the osmosis of the US and just our culture. So, and I have like several little silly stories of just like where that shows up in one way or another. So that's why it's of interest of mine. And I think my ultimate end goal is to be a champion for healthy expressions of our feminine and masculine energies, and well, I guess it starts with just making it safe for everybody's healthy self-expression of those things, right? And so, you know, for my kid, you know, I want him to feel comfortable expressing those as well. I need to tap into my ability to do that as well, because I've got 30 plus years under my belt with you know, the conditioning that exists here. So it's probably unpacking and opening up of things that I need to work on as well. So, but yeah, so it just has a lot of weight now that there's another generation that I'm connected to and responsible for. So yeah. I want to be very cognizant. I talk to dads as well, just about how do we do this with how do we do this better with our kids? Not that my parents did anything wrong necessarily, but just how do we prepare our kids to be agents for change in those specific ways?
So many claps to you, Kyle. So many claps. Yes, and yes. So starting off, what you were talking about, this dynamic between men and women being in flux. Yeah, I think that we're in flux, partially because going back to what we were talking about, by there not being any separation, we've separated to a fault. And I think that separation and to be specific, the separation of divine masculine and divine feminine energy as a means to create social order is really what I would consider, like, my theory is like the root of this flux in relations. So going a little bit further back, like, definitely want to be deliberate with separating intentionally, in this case, the difference between divine masculine and divine feminine energy and gender expression. So I think, and I definitely want to touch on gender expression for sure, and use that word, because I think that the way that we express our gender is our responsibility, but is our responsibility and our right to reclaim that and to carry it and to wear it. But it also is our responsibility to do exactly what you said you were doing, like deconstructing the conditioning that we've all been exposed to and indoctrinated with it. So, but I think that is a product of more dominant masculine energy, the embodiment of it here. And so, like, really keeping it kind of simple, talking about, like, definitely men constructed the way the way a society functions right now as we know it in the West. And heavily with logic and reason. And so I'm going to now play between gender norms that we know, like men being the ones that really forged these constructions, but also it speaks to divine masculine energy, which kind of holds, like, definitely the thinking part of the brain, which holds action, which holds structure, which holds form. It can be rigid in its detriment, and it can be a little inflexible, dogmatic. But it's interesting to me, like, of course, like, if men were the one that created how society functions right now as we've known it, and as we've known it for the past generations, it makes sense for the separation to have occurred, because that's the way the human mind is able to make sense of really lofty concepts, is to break it apart. But I think that when it comes to understanding energies, like especially divine energies, and I'm using the word divine to mean something higher than us, like in the ultimate highest, like, source, and however you want to call that. But to me, it's source energy. To some, it's God. To others, it's Brahman, and the list goes on. But yes, I want to really speak to the energy coming directly from source when I talk about divinity. In order to really understand energy on that level, we have to begin with scaffolding, with, like, breaking things down, categorizing, because that's how the mind just processes. And the masculine energy that we're all gifted allows us to do that, allows us to calculate, not necessarily discern, because that's when feminine energy comes in. But I think, like, heavy masculine energy in its divine sense, but not in its highest expression of that divinity. So there's a difference there too. I feel like if the masculine energies in the embodiment form. So men that created these frameworks that we are living out, they were meant to live out culturally, not meant to live out, that we were conditioned to live out culturally. If they were operating in their highest expression of that energy, then they would know the need for the oneness.
So I wanted to circle back to what you said about the separation to make sure I understood. But when you say the separation, it's like masculine energy, male body, man is one, and then feminine energy, female body, and woman as like so those separations were required by the patriarchal way of thinking and that structured system of dominance and subjugation and all that. Like that was like an inherent thing. But what's in flux and what's changing is that people are not accepting that dichotomy because it's inaccurate. It's not reflective of the fluidity of energy first and foremost, but those assignments are not always in that categorization, right?
Yep. Yeah. So thanks for cleaning that up and bringing me back there. Because yes, that's what I meant. Perfect. You hit the nail on the head when talking about this, defining separation. So yeah, thinking like because somebody is in feminine form, that and they're exuding more feminine energy, and then there's a certain gender role that they have to fulfill, and it's usually you have to fulfill it to keep your status in society, and it's like a survival tactic or tool. My theory, I think this has to be out there somewhere. I know if I just did the research, but my theory is too that, because men created this, and I'm not male bashing, because the whole reason why I do this work is because I'm all about balancing out the energies, and I think I know that we need masculine energy, and I think even men in their physical forms have a place and a role in society, in this world, in the cosmos, all that. So not male bashing, I want to be clear about that. But the men that did create these structures, when they're heavy on their masculine energy and not balanced out with their feminine energy, then there is this power dynamic. I think that there's no surprise that the masculine energy was exalted. Not only do we have the masculine energy is the power source, which is again why it's so needed in all of us to cultivate, and we can get into that in a second, but it's also like hyper ego too if it's not balanced out with the feminine energy. And so it's my way is the best way, and every other way is subordinate. And so I think it makes sense why that's trickled down into the societal norms that we once known it, for women to be subordinate, for feminine energy to look weaker, for our role to be more domicile, for it to be more taking all of the gifts of feminine energy, divine feminine energy, and making it look like it's secondary, is definite masculine energy in its detriment and not in its exaltation. So not in the highest expression of it. And I think that's where we're coming off of. Kind of going back to evolutionary astrology though, everything evolves. And so when you're talking about now raising your son, and your son kind of having these questions at an early age that you didn't really have before, then again, we're seeing how and even looking that our generation is having these gender conversations and conversations on intersectionality when the past generations didn't have them as fluidly. So then we're seeing the progress of evolution happening in real time. But we're meant to keep going. And I think where we're going is into a place where we are understanding that there is something more than just the binary.
Yeah.
And then we're getting curious because, again, whenever we feel the inkling, then we get curious and we start acting on it, which is the epitome of masculine and feminine energy, divine masculine and feminine energy at play constantly, like that there's no separation. Once we're feeling that there's something else more and we're curious, the feeling is the feminine energy, the curiosity and the reasoning through it is the masculine energy. You cannot separate them if we're talking about evolving.
And so I guess if you look at society now, it sounds like maybe I'm reading too much into it. You sound relatively optimistic about the trajectory. Is that the case? Do you feel positively generally about where we're heading?
Okay, on my best days, yes, but the optimism is coming from a real rational and practical place because the pendulum swings.
Yeah.
What I know through history, through the study of history, is that when we started the ancient civilization, so that we know it, like Kemet, if we're talking about their origin.
Kemet being Egypt, for those who aren't familiar with the ancient name for
Word. There are studies that hold that during that era when we were one with the cosmos, when everything was, when we understood that there was a divine orchestration and lived by that, that fueled how civilization ran was how the stars were aligned, and how the stars were aligned informed everything down from our tangible structures like our buildings, the pyramids and whatnot, to our societal structures and how we related with each other. And in history, like, that was heavy feminine energy if we're talking about astrology. And then we started gravitating towards more masculine energy. And again, when I'm saying astrology and stuff, there's certain planets that are associated with masculine and feminine energy too. So we're talking about alignment, but that's a whole nother, I told you it's a rabbit hole, so that's a whole nother ballgame. But the way astrologically things were positioned during that time of Kemetic civilizations was heavy on divine energy as well. Then we take this shift towards when we blend into the Hermetic periods, when ancient Greeks and like the Thoth era, then we start getting into Grecian philosophy, Grecian civilizations and whatnot. And that was the progression where we started getting into more masculine energy. And then we can start seeing how we ended up being here, like our counterparts refer to them as the ancestors, and that was what fueled their motivation for creating society. And so then now what we're seeing is the pendulum swinging, and everything is cyclical, everything is evolutionary. So I'm optimistic because I do believe in divine order and that there being a unique design and consciousness to that. But I don't want to say I'm fueled with optimism on a day-to-day because I know that we are in the beginning phases and things need to be dismantled and deconstructed first.
Word. I hear that.
Sorry. And that's scary, but
Decolonizing minds and bodies everywhere.
At least I'm optimistic enough to hold the conversation.
That's fair. That says a lot because I know a lot of people who, when it comes to, black and white issues, whatever, like they're just like, yeah, I'm just tired.
Yeah.
I'm not even having that conversation, especially with somebody who may not agree and needs the nudge or the education or whatever. A lot of people don't have the tolerance for it, and I understand. You know?
Me too.
But I also feel like the needle won't move unless it's being moved.
Yeah.
So.
And I think there's a lot to be said. Like, what powers up the motivation is balancing out the energy. Like, I can't say it enough. I think, I can speak for myself that I think I am. So in the beginning of this episode, I identified myself as being a woman, and I've identified as being a queer woman, which I stand by, even in the queer community, there is a lot of conversations about gender expression and gender identity. And mind you, the conversation is so rapidly evolving that I feel like I can't keep up with the times, but especially since I've been spending a lot of time by myself and outside the community. But, between like gender nonconforming, gender non-binary, those that choose not to identify with any of the question, like avoiding the question altogether, but want to dip into their sexual expression, trans conversations, so there's a lot of conversations going on. So I'm deliberate when I am holding fast to that woman expression just because that's just my experience and my story. But I know that I am. I'm in female form, but I know that's just an expression. To me, gender is kind of like how we identify it. We get to stylize it. I think it's the style in which we carry our energies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sitting with it too. I'm still sitting with that concept, but I don't think we had a choice in what kind of form we came in, but we do have a choice how we carry it, how we wear it, how we use it to identify our walks through lives, and whether or not we want to keep it, keep this expression. And I think all of that is our right, as long as we're like sitting with self. And feel like it's the best thing to balance ourselves. Like whatever we're deciding to do, it's with intention. Mm-hmm. But I definitely know that masculine energy has been coursing through me for a minute, Like I've never, like all the stories, like I've always loved playing in dirt, never cared about scraping my knees, like wanted low ponytails, and that was it, simple eyeliner, mascara, that's the extent of it, Love my combat boots. But I did go, like, there's moments like I love, like, modeling. And, I love, like, I used to love getting my hair done. And I used to love wearing heels and stuff. And I think all of that can be everybody. Like, not everybody. Let me say that all that can be everybody because it doesn't need to be.
Right. But all of that is within you.
But all that is within me.
And that's, yeah. And I think, and so for me, when I hear you say that, like, you spoke a lot about everybody's work and acknowledgement of those energies within them, and I also pull that back. So I need to do more work on that myself first and foremost. So I don't want to move on without acknowledging that. I also look at the societal pressures to conform, and therefore the feeling of it that often doesn't feel safe to truly express and to embody and to portray your energies as they truly feel right for you.
Yeah.
Or not you personally, but for us as people.
Yeah.
I had a friend in high school who male body, identified as a guy or whatever, but he would like paint his fingernails just different colors. Like he was just like, yeah, I like these colors. You know? And it was just like, okay.
Yeah.
But it like. And like that's like, and I don't even think he never got picked on or anything for it, but it's just like, I mean, and nor should you, if you like, you know what I'm saying. So any of that range should be without any judgment or without any kind of negative energy. And I hope now folks are feeling more safe doing that. I realize that might be very regional in terms of we're in the DMV, so I think hopefully here that's. Folks feel fairly safe doing that, but I realize in other parts of the country and the world that they may not feel safe at all still.
Yeah. What I keep hearing when you said that, when you talked about your high school friend, is like container, like because I think that in order to feel safe, like, okay, masculine energy is the container, like feminine energy creates like the fluidity that fills up that space. So that's one way I'm keep hearing container, but the container of the environment to make him feel safe and comfortable, to then allow his his energy to flow fluidly through the container of his body as well,
Yeah.
And so, in order for him, and then going from his body being the container, I think. Oh, how beautiful it would be for everybody to just be able to just wear their energies with confidence, like no matter how it's expressed. Because like we all like aesthetics, like we might not be the kind of person that, values aesthetics more than other values and whatnot. But everybody loves some kind of beauty or has a definition of beauty or a variation of what they consider beautiful. And that can be okay. Like he thought that it might be beautiful, or at least something that was attractive for him that made him more attractive, or that he made him more attractive either to himself or to other people, which is why he painted his nails. And he must have wore it with confidence.
Yeah.
Nobody teased him. But then what gave him that confidence? Who knows? I'm hopefully, like, maybe you said nobody bullied him, nobody teased him, nobody picked on him. Maybe
not that I know of.
Not that you know of. So maybe the container of that, scaling that out regardless. And to your point, that I think we all need, like, it would be just beautiful to have a society that allowed us to be a safe container for everybody to be able to express their energies fluidly, you know, and to sit with what that would look like, because we're all sitting with figuring out ourselves, you know, we're figuring out what our career paths are, what our hobbies are, who our love interests are, like what gives us pleasure, both physically, mentally, like emotionally, like, and we're figuring it all out. Like,
yeah.
So we should be able to have this space to figure out what is the highest expression of ourselves. And I think that is the marriage between the highest energy forms, divine masculine energy, divine feminine energy.
I mean, I think that was beautifully said. I think that wraps it up quite nicely, to be honest with you. Yeah. And when you say that, like, I agree with you. And once you say it so succinctly like that, I immediately think of, like, okay, how do we act on that? Or what actions do we take day to day, minute by minute, that drives towards that world, you know? I
would begin to answer this question the same way I begin to answer every question that requires a lot of heavy lifting. And that's mindfulness, like awareness. Like, first, really getting comfortable with what the hell is divine masculine energy and what the hell is divine feminine energy, because it's not gender roles. Like, I think gender roles are a byproduct of it, an oversimplification of it. So I know we've talked a lot at length of, like, what the role of a man is in a family dynamic, you know?
Yeah.
And that, I think that example alone is probably my favorite. I won't say the best. Is my favorite example of masculine and feminine energy.
Okay, speak on it.
So in this society, and you can push back because I will name my bias that I will never know what it means to be a cis man, and I probably will never know what it feels like to be in a family dynamic in terms of, like, raising a child. So yes, chime in or push back. But how I've been conditioned, and I feel like I've watched other fathers be conditioned, and everybody around me has spoken on this, is that they're meant to be the breadwinners. They're meant to be strong. They're meant to, and strong not only physically in stature, because that's a whole thing too. You're supposed to look like you can intimidate somebody if the time calls for it. In addition to being ready to stand up and intimidate somebody if the time calls for it. So there's no room for the flight, freeze, or play dead when you're up against a conflict or a fear or danger. And
you were talking about strength. You said not just physical. Were you also mental?
Mental and emotional. So, like, emotional strength looks like not showing emotions. Maybe, or ultimate control over emotions, only showing emotions when it comes to intimacy, and intimacy has a connotation of just being in the bedroom.
Right. Yeah. Now, it's funny. I think the one place where in United Statesian culture where men can be emotional is beyond what you just described is with sports.
But not too much, because we see what happens with now I'm going to set myself up for dropping names. You
mean a particular athlete?
Yeah, man. I was just watching a football player dyed his hair. It's like purple now. He just was in the playoffs.
I don't even know. I could look that up, but
sorry.
But you're right. The players themselves, no, I'm talking about the fans.
Oh yeah.
From the fans, because even the players can't be emotional. I remember, and I'm dating myself, but Richard Sherman after a huge play, in a playoff game or whatever, he was with the Seahawks, and they interviewed him literally right after really intense play, and he came off so hyper aggressive and everything, and everybody was pissed. They were like, because after a football game, you interview the guy. Oh well, we played hard and they played hard, and I'm just glad that we came out on top and we just prepared really. Like it's supposed to be. That's bull. Like to actually perform at that level, that's never the mentality. But so you're right. The players have to keep this like very emotionally even keel, like whatever. But the fans have full reign to act out, be crazy, like be out in freezing weather and put letters on your belly. You know what I'm saying? Like and just be like, oh, I'm so sad that like blah 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 got traded or whatever. Yeah. Oh, I'm so angry. I'm so happy. I'm so like that's the only place that men are allowed to be emotional beyond sex and I'm summarizing it up maybe loosely and inaccurately, but that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, I feel you 110%. Like the men were able to. That's the only time I saw men show sad emotions in the classroom, and felt comfortable doing it, not sneaking away. Was when like they're during the draft. Let me say that. Right. During the draft, it's like, man, and mind you, I was teaching in North Philly, so we had babies pass, and they still had to like take it to the counselor's suite or take it to the bathroom to shed those tears. But when the draft happened and they mans was traded, they held each other down. Yeah. And then I was in Philly when the Eagles won in their playoffs. So like, man. So yeah, to your point, you're right when it comes to sports for sure. And then even if we're talking about the athletes, the only time I think, not the only time, they're supposed to keep their composure for sure until they get that championship ring. And then it's like, my mother.
Right. Then they can cry and talk about God and everything else.
Yeah. But yeah. So going back to strength, emotional strength, and then yes, mentally. I don't even know how much the mind is brought up. The mind, like mental health, is brought up in the house. Like I think it's still taboo. I think we have a lot of campaigns around it. Some awareness is made around it. But when we talk about what the stereotype is for the male dynamic, the father figure in the household, when it comes to strength, mental strength, maybe when it comes to being able to think your way out of like a problem, like it's supposed to be
more strategy or more,
like can you solve it, like redirect us if we get lost, like or negotiate this contract, so something like that. But I think that's when the mind comes up. And so super one-sided, and it doesn't allow for the full expression of the man, knowing that the man is human. And so what does it mean to be human?
To have female and to have masculine and feminine energy. I said female energy.
Yeah. We're learning.
Right. Feminine energies. Yeah. And so, so there's not a safe space to do that for men.
Not all across the board. So like, let's say this, like and I'm intentionally overgeneralizing here. When a man is made to feel safe, when the father figure is made to feel safe in that household, it's usually in the company of the spouse, and they're behind closed doors in their intimate spaces. It's not even with the child at the time, because they have a role to be disciplinarian or be a little stern, But so for. And it's that mother, the woman being a mother figure to both, kind of, because like when else do men get that nurturing, Yep. And usually they kind of gravitate towards the woman who's able to do that for them, like create that space, but also have that boundary, like don't take it out. Like this is the finite period of time that we get to do this.
It's a very limited space.
Very limited space, and that's usually defined by the father figure, the male. Like this is our time that I'm finally get to be vulnerable with you, like, and so now the woman is like holding that space, And
as you just mentioned, it's not even modeled for the children. So whether the children are boys, girls, whatever, they're not learning that piece of it.
Right. They're not learning all that what daddy goes through. Daddy gets it done. Mommy has her magic. Now, mind you, this is not taking away from women's superpowers neither, because I would talk about.
You haven't even talked about that yet.
I haven't even talked about it yet. But I'm like right now, when it comes to being able to balance the energy, I am talking. I think women have more of an invitation to get there, because this kind of healing work or this kind of the healing work that leads to balancing is more feminine energy. And then in this society, we're conditioned to think that that's, what women do, like that's more of a girl thing.
Yeah.
And so not even getting to the woman's role intentionally right now. One, for the sake of time, but two, because there's spaces for us, and I'm wondering where the spaces are for men. And I'm saying that from a place of saying that both are equally necessary. That both need space.
Okay, yeah. So that's a great point. And so I guess what you're getting at is that there needs to be space for masculine and feminine energy within men, and that's not happening, or it's there, but it's not being acknowledged, it's not being catered to. And so I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on the value that feminine energy presents in men, and I guess conversely, what are men and what is society losing because we're not, allowing us men to like tap into that.
Yeah. Okay. Broadly, I'm gonna answer both sides of that question and just say like the value and what's being lost is balance and full expression. Like it really is that simple. When we talk about balancing out this energy, we're talking about losing not only our essence, but we're losing us operating at the highest expression that we can. And that doesn't mean that everything will be peaceful and there'll be the glory days per se, or like there'll be absence of conflict and human struggle and stuff. That just means that we could do it so much more easily. We lose just being able to like play. And again, that doesn't mean that we're not gonna have conflict.
Play.
Yeah, play. Like it took me let me say this, it took me a long time to really get behind what almost all spiritual philosophies teach, and that's like that we're meant to be here to experience joy and bliss. But I think that's because it took me a long time to decondition myself from being that we're supposed to work towards a goal and acquire this level of success. But peeling all that back, like, yes, we are meant to experience joy. And I think the way we do that is by balancing out our energies. And so we miss that whole dynamic. And it's funny that I'm saying this as a queer woman, but like I'll bring it back up to masculine and feminine energy in its divinity, but we miss being able to interplay, like men and women, masculine and female energy. We miss whatever that interplay feels like, or miss the opportunity to treat like the earth as a playground. And it makes me sad. Like, honestly, like if I were at home, like journaling this out, I probably would shed a tear right now. Like when I think about it, it makes me sad.
Yeah, that hit me. Like I got shivers right now thinking about that. Like,
yeah.
And it's just, my mind is like I don't even know what that looks like, but my mind is like spinning on the beauty that must be.
Yeah. And let me be clear like this. So in real time, you're hearing me talk, you're hearing an expression of my masculine energy. Like the way that I process information, I definitely know that that's my divine. I'm more heavy on the divine masculine, because the only way I'm able to like access these lofty and woo-woo type of concepts is through logic and reason. Like if I don't see any evidence of it, I don't stand behind it. And it took me a long time to cultivate my intuition. Like some are just naturally intuitive and they just like, this is how the world works. And like, that's it. And that's not me, I've had to study. So to your point, like even with me getting to a point of arriving that this is the truth, and I haven't seen it, like I have to I am banking on trust, but I have seen what it feels like in my own expression to have gotten closer to balancing, and I've only experienced more joy because of it. Or I see some of my friends who have made it a really marked point in their lives to reclaim the lost parts of their expressions, or and like from doing shadow work, and I see like people, we go through the trenches, we do, and it's an ugly process, but I do see people get closer to bliss and balance. But I do want to go back to the point of like, how do we get here? You know, in that whole concept of awareness and being aware, because I think that right now, I think we're allowing ourselves to imagine, you know, and seeing like what would it feel like to have this balance and this bliss and this joy. But I think that's a quantum leap from where we are right now, and I want to.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's room to imagine. We have to. But I think that, you know, being practical and realistic, too, is definitely necessary and a thing. So where we are, is I think we're still really saturated with the gender roles. I think that the gender roles are naturally evolving, but slowly, because everything in this space takes time. But I think that the first thing we can do is just be aware of just where we are right now in our day-to-day, even if we're subscribing to the gender roles, how this interplay of masculine and femininity, or divine masculine and divine feminine energy are showing up. So using the same examples, right, of the stereotypes of what a father figure or the male role in a family dynamic should look like, or supposed to look like.
I saw the air quotes.
Air quotes. You know, we talked about like just this strength. I think I said something before, strength. Breadwinner, right?
Mm-hmm,
like breadwinner. Even with that, there's masculine and feminine energy in that. Like men, the stereotype is that men are supposed to go to work. You know, so that's the action that is the masculine energy. But men creating their own businesses or figuring out what their career goals are, like creating a career or like entering into their career, figuring out a career path that fits them, whatever that process is that has them thinking through that or feeling through that is the feminine energy, you know, that creative energy of being an entrepreneur. Like, I have this business idea. That's divine feminine energy. I think like maybe going through some examples, then defining what the masculine, because I don't think did I define what masculine is?
I don't think, you know, it's funny because I was literally about to ask, like, we've been talking so much about masculine energy, and I'm realizing that my homework assignment for me is to acknowledge my feminine energy and tap into it, or just to allow myself to observe it where I see it come up,
Yeah.
and then learn how to honor it and let it, you know, or just study it and know it and be intimate with it and let it and learn how to be more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And expressing it even. But I was like, well, wait, what am I looking for exactly?
What am I looking for, right?
Which brings us to the definitions, I guess, I guess we didn't officially do.
So definitely feel the need to define it so that we don't fall victim to being like, oh, I'm supposed to tap into my feminine energy, which means like I'm supposed to cry when I feel something, but I'm not a natural crier. Or am I supposed to like go to get a spa? Like, or, you know, go to a spa and get like manicure, pedicure and be like okay with it as a man? I don't know. But no, yes, maybe. But no, okay. So taking a step back, divine feminine, divine masculine. Divine feminine, anything lunar energy. Divine masculine, solar energy. Divine feminine energy is receptive. It is emotional, yes, but it is the sentient emotions or the intuitive emotions. Not always the expression of our emotions, you know. It's the place that we incubate our intuition or like tap into our intuition. It is intuitive, it's imaginative, it's limitless and vast. It doesn't have boundaries. It's receptive, so it receives. So if you think about like the relationship with the moon to the sun, the moon receives the energy receives the light from the sun and reflects it outwards. But that doesn't mean it's subordinate. That's its job, and it does it well. So that's its strength. It's nurturing energy, maternal energy. It's inward energy. So if we think about like the dichotomy of the mind versus the brain, then feminine energy is the mind. You know, it's where thought rests, where masculine energy is the brain. It's where thinking really is generated and plans are mapped out. feminine energy is resting energy. It's not dormant and it's not stagnant, because to rest it's sort of action, you know. Or let me say this: it's not inertia. It's not without any energy, you know. It's still alive.
Yeah.
It germinates the seed, so it's definitely fertile. So masculine energy is, again, fueled by the sun. One of my favorite astrologers says the sun's energy brings light, heat, life, and vitality. It's action. It's generative. It's spontaneous. It has a boundary. It has a structure. But the structure is with purpose, because the sun's energy or masculine energy fuels our purpose and allows us to act out on it. Is aggressive energy, but not aggressive energy in the sense of like conflict, or it's not aggressive energy in the sense of, even though it could create some conflict, you know, but it's more aggressive energy in the sense that it charges, it acts, it goes forward, it's forward movement. It gets the thing done, it gets it going. That kind of aggression. What else? It's outward energy, so it's the outward expression of the emotions. Yeah.
I think earlier you said structure too. I
And
can't remember if you just said it just now.
Yep, it's structure, yeah. And that's I think where we get the whole strength from. Like, it is a strong structure, right. But it's the container. Like, where. So we were talking that time too about the difference, like the masculine energy is like the container, but you need some in order to give it purpose. Now we're getting into like what it means to balance out these energies. If masculine energy is the structure and the container, then what's a construction container? Like, what's the purpose of it if it doesn't have anything to hold? To contain. And so what's being held? Well, you want that divine the divine feminine energy to complement the divine masculine energy. So assuming that the container and the structure is there, but it allows for some kind of malleability, you know, like, or at least is able to contort, you know, then you want to fill it with divine feminine energy, and that gives it its purpose. And then it gives the divine feminine energy its purpose too, because it's not just boundless and just it's super, super fluid without any direction. And so what direction are we going? We're using this vastness of intuition to fuel a purpose. So the vastness of intuition, feminine energy, filling the container of purpose, and the purpose fuels that, like, it's fueled by the intuition. It makes sense of the intuition. It gives intuition structure and some marching orders, some action. And so we all have all of that within us, you know. And yeah, I think it's everybody's invitation to play with. Well, if I have it in me, why do I have the show? You know, I think we as a society do a huge disservice to humanity by trying to give a one-size-fits-all definition to that.
Yeah.
And I really wish that humans would be okay with just not knowing what that means to the next person, you know, as long as it's not, their intentions aren't to directly inflict harm to any living thing.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think we really struggle, and it's funny because as you were speaking about some of those, my heavily colonized brain was struggling I understand conceptually what they were, but in real life manifestation, like, I'm not even sure what that would look like.
Yeah. Okay. So let's give some examples to start off real small.
Okay.
Because I think we always should start where we are. You know, like calling awareness to where we are, just treating ourselves as the observer. You know,
right.
Starting to look at ourselves like a movie, kind of. So okay, going back to the examples of the overgeneralization, we talked about the breadwinner and whatnot. There's creative expression in how we get the bread. Right. You know, and so the man, and there's a fine line, because sometimes when the back is up against the wall, the man is over here like wheels spinning. How am I going to get it? How am I going to get it? How am I going to get it? That's still masculine energy heavy. But if there's an idea that sparks, you know, like Or if there's an interest, like, hey, I really like doing this. I'm going to figure out how to make some money doing what I love. Like that, I really love doing this is the divine feminine. I'm going to get some money and I'm going to get some money. I'm going to get to the bag. Like, how am I going to make some money out of this thing? Well, sitting down and calculating and developing a plan is the masculine energy.
That's really interesting because when you said that, I thought of like rappers.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me because that is a very real a very real and beautiful application of feminine energy.
Absolutely.
And it's just, I guess, ironic that like, a lot of the rhetoric and lyrics of hip hop are so misogynistic, and I sorry, I know a bunch of hip hop heads are like, hip hop isn't all misogynistic. I know that it's not. I know that it's not. But we do see misogyny in hip hop music.
Yes.
It's a thing, and it's interesting that such a beautifully feminine process, still results in that. But and it would be interesting if there was an acknowledgement, if there was an appreciation and respect. If we honored, if MCs honored the feminine role in their process, like how would that then, shift the narrative and shift the messaging that we put out there? Yeah.
Yeah, would their lyrics still be the same? Intentionally overgeneralized.
I know. Yeah. I know people are gonna be like, well, not everybody.
I know. We're not talking about authentic hip hop.
Right. I mean, yeah, for real. Like, yeah, that's real. So like I said, I'm gonna say something somebody disagree with. I don't care. That's part of what it is. But I'm trying to make a point. I hope the point comes across that, like, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's real. And yeah, I really do wonder if the lyrics would be the same. What would happen? Physical expression, like what guys put on, like do I look good today in this like sweatsuit and this suit when I get my hair cut? Like, yeah, I'm looking sharp. Like whatever that feeling is from that aesthetic point of what makes you feel attractive to you, divine feminine energy. Even if it looks like societal's definition of masculine apparel, a masculine cut, like whatever, like the feeling that you get when you're when you look nice, divine feminine energy,
That's one for me that I've struggled with, and I've had friends and partners like, I'm gonna say fight to be dramatic. It wasn't actually fighting, but like literally argue with me about my lack of style or whatever. Like, and you met me like last year, almost about a year ago. So like the last year, maybe the last 2 years have been the most stylish years of my life, like ever. You could add up all the style I had in the prior 30 plus years, and it wouldn't equal like the degree to which I've like started to tap into like images and looks and stuff like that. And that's because of the people in my life that have been like, all right, try this, put this and this together. And I'm like, oh, I see what you did there. I would have never done it myself. But so maybe that's a resistance of my own. So when I look back and I realize that there's an appreciation for it, that's an appreciation for my feminine, like that's an acknowledgement of my feminine energy, appreciating that effort and that result. And maybe it's been my overly masculine, patriarchal learning, conditioning that has quelled that to this point. Yeah. Potentially.
And it could be a deeper quelling or like surface one, because so yes, to your point, like it seems like you've been tapping into your feminine energy in that regard, with
resistance. I'm getting there.
With resistance, and maybe
I'm in training. I'm trying,
right?
And now that you put it that way, I think I'll really work on less resistance. But like I've resisted it this entire time.
And then so my follow up question, like let's say I was working with you, like it would be, well, do you know where that resistance is coming from? Like,
I think it comes from, the way I would express it would be a degree of humility. Like I like, well, first of all, when I was growing up, my mom never supported whatever the fashions were at the time. Like I was the kid with like that wore the same uncool New Balances every day. Like never had a pair of Jordans in my life to this day. Never had a pair of Jordans.
I've had one.
That's cool, you know what I'm saying? But like my brother, like he wanted the things, you know, and he got himself a job as soon as he could so he could start buying stuff.
Right.
Because my mom wasn't going to buy it. My dad, like, my parents didn't necessarily value it in that perspective. So they were just like, yeah, buy stuff that matches lots of things. Like, that just makes sense. And so I guess I had an insecurity related to like my inability to do what the cool kids were doing. So that just built up a wall and a defense. And then I took pride in that difference. And then I held to it as like, I don't care about clothes. But it just was maybe rooted in all of that. But given the freedom and given the freedom to really tap into what my style might be or whatever. I mean, the kid, like, he's 8 and he's he even said, he was like, I'd like to go and kind of just pick out my style. I'm like, and as a dad, I'm like thinking about my own stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do that. Like, what's your style, 8-year-old boy?
Right.
Like, you tell me what your style is. Cause like the idea of that is just completely novel. Like, one of my homeboys, you know, Kenny, like, he took me to, like, we went to the mall a few years ago. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. He's like, so when you see yourself, like, what do you see? Like, I was like, jeans and a t-shirt. He was like, but what do you want to portray? I'm like, that I'm clothed. I don't know. I don't think about this. Like, it's just, people don't walk around naked. Like, that's what it is. Like, you know, but so the fact that the kiddo has like whatever his idea of sense of style, like, I'm excited about that. And I want to encourage that because, like, I need to do that for myself because I have no idea.
Yeah. And so, like, so that's the hyper masculine energy because the ego fueled it. You know what I mean? But the ego is there to protect us. So that's another thing, that divine masculine is tied into the ego, but the whole point is to protect us from whatever we feel it might be a threat. But so you see how it's oversimplified when we talk about gender roles as being the protector.
Right.
It's not just facing and focusing and standing up to the opponent. It's like literally to make
personal protection too. It's emotional protection. It's all of that.
Everything that we think will protect us. So then, what does it feel like to, one, let yourself know that you're safe now, and that you can then create your own. Not be out for like. Let's say this is where it gets deep. Where some divine energies get deep, because I would even invite you to not even to start with style first.
Okay.
Like, start with values, and that's divine feminine energy. The value system, because the value system that informs the action. So the value, what we really ground down as our value, what we hold as value, divine feminine energy. How we act on those values is divine masculine. So like you said, like Kenny was asking you about the values, like where do you see yourself? Or you were talking about your values before, like your household didn't really value the latest trends. You know, now that you're fully grown and out the house and get to quote unquote reparent yourself,
right,
you know, what are your values? Do you value the trends? If so, which ones? Do you value just being clothed? Because that's okay. So that just means, like, if just being clothed is your value system, then maybe your style would be more like investing in organic cotton that's equitably sourced, instead of like a style or or you know, like an aesthetic per se. And that's still feminine energy. That's balancing out your feminine energy. You see?
Got it.
So, but honoring your body, like, you get to understand that you get to dress and clothe you. You get to take care of your clothes as protection, and then you get to like nurture your body too. Like, so the divine feminine is like, I'm taking care. I'm responsible for this body. You know, that's divine feminine. Divine masculine is, how do I protect it? Wear clothes. Like, real logical over there.
Like, some of the examples were on the masculine side. I was curious what feminine energies could be happening within me that I'm not even observing actively.
Okay, so I think it'll help to go back to the gender roles again with the male family unit thing. Right. So we talked, then like chipping away at that a little bit, and then we can probably see some come up too. Right. So we just talked about physical strength and the different expressions of feminine energy there. Emotional strength, you know, tapping into emotions and stuff could be an expression, but honestly, just the fact that you feel like, can I reference something you said? Okay, so I know the other day when we were talking, you were saying how when you when you're feeling through heavy emotions, you tend to kind of like shut down, or it's hard for you to articulate that in the moment. Just the awareness that you're feeling, and that's a response, like that's a immediate response to your emotions, is a way, that awareness is a way to tap into feminine energy, because then from there you can figure out how to hold yourself in that moment. Because right now it is either a trauma response or an egoic response, that's having you shut down, fight, flight, freeze, play dead. And it's natural and it's human, but because you've articulated that, you wanted to do some work around it. And that just knowing how we know about human behavior, it's not always functional or beneficial, to in all senses. It could be beneficial, and because your ego is doing what it's doing best, it's protecting you.
Right. So that moment might be a protected thing, but from an overall life growth standpoint, that might be something to work on at the same time.
Yep. And I think the way to do that is to do it with the intention at first, and then that intention is like awareness. How do I hold myself down? How do I what do I need in this moment? And giving that to yourself. And that's, right now we're talking about the absence of awareness of your divine feminine, but it's at play. Because something is happening there for you to be able to regroup and then keep going.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of nurturing factor there too that you might not be aware of. But calling awareness to it starts fueling it and feeding it and growing it, and then being deliberate in whatever that you need in that moment,
Yeah. It's funny as you're saying that some of that has been feedback I've gotten from partners I've dated or whatever. It's like, whether it's taking care of myself in certain ways, giving myself the mental space to not shut down when I, things like that. And so it's funny. Maybe just some of the answers to that are literally just listening to women or people who have feminine energy, listen to their feedback about me or ourselves, if those listening for those listening who are more masculine presenting, just take that in and actually try to apply it. And I've resisted it for so long, and I've just been I just self-care, yeah, I get it, but I don't have time, and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm really, for over a year now, I've been trying to say, rather than I don't have time, I don't make time. Because we own our time, right? So it's not, what I'm saying? Saying I don't have time is very passive.
Yeah.
But no. We own that. So, but I need to conscientiously make the time for honoring those pieces.
I'm over here doing the happy dance because that's literally just receiving the information, absorbing it, letting it sink in, discerning it, sitting with it. Feminine energy, we're receptive qualities, reflection. We reflect. That's what we do, And I'm saying we because I am super proud of my feminine expression, but divine feminine energy outside of the embodiment, yes, that's what the divine feminine energy does. It reflects. It sits with, yes, all of what you just said. It also discerns, why we were resistant for so long, and then because that could be deliberate, but it could be something, some inner child work, some shadow work, so, it could be in some recesses that are underneath, and right. So divine feminine energy, that's why we do rest, that's why we do reflect, so that we can bring that up and then do something with it. Divine masculine energy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I realized like we could talk all day about this, and I definitely want to continue that thread specifically. But I want to pivot real quick because I want to one thing I did mention in the intro is that your company, your business, your work, and I want to let you speak to how you got to where you are with what you do. I know it took a lot of intention. You spent years, I believe, really honing in and like figuring out what it was, both the intention and then how to present it and how to make it a business. So can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I think honestly it was me meeting yoga, me stopping resisting, tapping into yoga. I was resistant for yoga for a long time because to me it was like a mark of gentrification. Like especially like before I moved to Philly, I just saw a lot of white women with ponytails like jogging with yoga mats, and I was just like, this feels like a takeover, and it doesn't feel like I belong. But in Philly there was an easel with LGBTQ yoga,
nice.
queer and trans yoga, at the same place where I went to a dope spoken word event, and I was like, this is a yoga studio. Like, there's so many reasons. I still resist it, but it took me a minute to get on my mat there. But at that time when I found yoga, I was also teaching special education at the secondary level, at high school level in
public schools,
a public charter school in North Philly. And I was a reading interventionist, but I taught like over 200 kids. Like I think on my roster was like 240 some kids.
Like in 1 year?
Yeah, I touched all of. Yeah, I had to touch all of 9th and 10th grade who qualified for special education. Yeah, which was more, and there was more kids enrolled in special education in 9th and 10th grade in our building than there was in some campuses had in their whole student body population.
Wow.
But yes, I was at that point, and then to qualify for special ed, you just had to be like 2 to 3 years behind in your reading level. Like, that's it. And so, I mean, I did have some kids with specific learning disabilities and behavioral disorders and whatnot, but I was a reading interventionist, and my goal was to like close the reading gap. Yeah. So most of my babies were reading on like the 3rd grade reading level in 9th grade.
Wow.
Yeah. And traveling from all parts of Philly. So if you know Philly, you can fit all of DC and like North Philly and some of the Northeast alone. Like, so they're traveling from like West Philly to get to North Philly. They're traveling from South Philly to get to North Philly. And I'm saying all that to say, because it literally was both. Like, I had worked 11 years to get to where I was. Like, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to work in a high school. I knew I wanted to teach English. I stumbled into special ed, and it was like, I'm not leaving this demographic alone. And then found yoga due to my own personal bullshit. Sorry. And that clash between like becoming awakened and awaken in all senses, like spiritually and emotionally, but also aware of the system like I had never been before. And I went to Howard, so I was militant at one point. So I knew I went into education thinking, a little naive me, that I was going to infiltrate the system from the inside and blow it up. Like, not knowing how big the system was, which is why I love the Matrix. Right. But yeah, so I was depressed. Like, I went through my first panic attack. I was fighting admin because I was like, yo, to get these babies to read, you want to know what we need to do? We need to make them relax and help them balance their energy. And let's bring a little bit of mindfulness into the classroom. And it was just like, we don't have time for that. Like, if you want to do it, find somebody, because you're not getting out the classroom. Like, who's going to take your space? And then it was just a lot of other resistance too. Like, when I would try to slip in best practices, when I was trying to slip in yogic practices, like on the side, then I was going against my metrics and my best practices for the classroom. So I had a lot of meetings with admin that year.
Meaning you were in trouble?
Yeah, maybe a few slaps on the wrist. But I was also doing it was a few slaps on the wrist, because I think they were starting to realize that they saw me growing and being non-negotiable more than I saw myself then, because I was also holding like professional learning circles. Like we had these like little mindset groups for the teachers
among
communities,
the adults, right? Mm-hmm.
Among adults. And so I was just like kind of like slipping in there, and they were just like, okay, like I was becoming dangerous, but I didn't know to what extent. And so then I was just like, actually was my partner at the time that was like, you can't do this another year. Like, they picked me up off the ground for my first panic attack and was just like, nah. And then literally, and that was in response to watching the Khalif Browder documentary on Netflix, because the kid looked just like one of my students. Like,
wow.
And I was just like, what am I doing? Yeah, I broke down. Literally a week later, the school social worker was like, after like a powwow of the teachers in my classroom, was like, you need to take the golden handcuffs off and like service the adults that do this work. You have a business. And she was a boss, entrepreneur, talking about blending her masculine energy. When I tell you, she had ego in the right direction, all confidence, all action, able to act on her ideas and her brilliance, and
able to communicate that in your direction too.
Exactly.
Channel yours.
Yep. But I still didn't believe it then. Took a year off, did another yoga teacher training, finished up my Reiki certification, and it was after Reiki 3 that I was just like, yo. It was after Reiki 3 and after taking a trauma-informed yoga class or yoga teacher training that served those experiencing reentry after experiencing incarceration, that got me saying like, yo, everybody needs yoga. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to balance their energy. And I just couldn't stop playing with the idea that this was the truth, like the answer. Like I thought that I went into the classroom to try to blow up the system. I went into the classroom to teach English because I was just like, yo, if I can teach my babies how to read, then we can be free. Right. Like we can advocate for ourselves, we can discern, we can use logic and reason. But I found like that's not the answer. And free in what kind of context? It was only socially, politically.
Right. And because I was gonna say there's a degree of truth to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that realm, yeah, for sure.
Yoga was like, wait, there's levels? There's levels? And so actually Buddhism told me there was levels, but yoga gave me the technology to apply it.
I was gonna say applicate, yep. Okay. So what is your business now? We haven't even said the name of it yet. What do you do? I
know, it's so long. Oh my gosh, cut that out, Kyle.
No, you're good. No. That whole story was beautiful. We're keeping that in there.
Okay.
But now it's all time for the shameless plug. So
So
what is it? So after that story, after that
yes.
that journey, which is honestly a beautiful story, a beautiful journey of just like
yes.
the world giving you feedback even before you were ready to receive it. But
what do I do now?
Yeah. What has that resulted in?
All right, so I have created an LLC called The Humble Practice. I'm an energetic wellness practitioner. I also consider myself a healing artist. But what does it mean to be an energetic wellness practitioner in my view, and what's my approach to it? It is to help us remember. It's everything. All my services are geared to us tapping into our authentic power. It's for us to find authentic liberation within ourselves, to then have it ripple out and affect the collective. And so to tap into our authentic power, I think we need to tap into our energy centers and balance the energies, find fluidity in the energies, and find just like self-empowerment to turn it into a lifestyle practice, to operate, to just at least want to get closer to our highest expression. And so my LLC provides people with the tools. Like I meet them where they are after a storytelling session. So we have a conversation similar to how we have. It's organic. And then I tailor based on my modalities, again, Reiki, yoga, spatial cleansing. We do journaling, meditation, breath work, mindfulness practices, just literally giving the tools for people to integrate within their daily lives to achieve this balance in whatever way.
That's dope. That's a beautiful thing. And it I'm just thinking back to when I met you and the others in the Urban Temple, and I was just like I had read My Grandmother's Hands, and it's very much about like healing trauma as really well, the book was about like healing your personal traumas, and applying that into the racial dynamic of like black, white, and cops and police brutality and all that kind of stuff. And I was like healing, and I wouldn't have used the language you just used now, but the language that you're saying to me is a political tactic.
Oh yes, absolutely.
For revolution, for real, because every other strategy we've tried, and I've said this on the podcast before, like we tried, integration with, Obama, that didn't work. We tried, segregated black capitalism. Tulsa was bombed. We tried radical socialist revolution. Black Panthers were killed off. Nation building within the country, Nation of Islam and others, like, never really panned out. Back to Africa, Garvey snuffed out. So like all those tactical body political movements have been failed or killed or annihilated or marginalized in one way or another. But the true, like, the energy work, the trauma work, because really, and I've said this before too on the show, the reason we're still where we are is because the story America tells itself is false. It's based on lies. And until we recast that story, which means we have to heal through the traumas of the story itself, whatever. So when I hear you say that, I'm like, that's beautiful, not only for the people whose lives you're saving, but I think that has a ripple. You mentioned a ripple effect. Like that, to me, is the solution to what is plaguing United Statesian culture. And like, just, I don't know. I went on a tangent, but I feel like that is such a beautiful work, and just immensely impactful and immensely necessary right here and now.
I'm like, you get it, Kyle. You get it, because that's exactly what it is. Like, I'm not afraid to say it's definitely a political tactic. I think I'm grateful that I've found a tactic that can slip through the nuances if it needs to. Yes. But I'm not trying to, when I do that, I'm not trying to silence the fact that it's definitely political.
You're a chameleon. It's okay.
Right. Okay. And like I forgot to mention that, like, but you touched on it. I've just like bottom lined it. Like, I'm really big on it being leveled, so like a lot of my mission too is to help people understand that everything comes down to levels, perspectives, and intentions. Like, I think it can be that simple. Yeah. But I mean, those are really complicated concepts to digest. But like you're saying, when nothing worked, that's because there was levels to it that we didn't really acknowledge, based off of like a people's perspective, and maybe not like the holistic perspective or the like humanitarian perspective, and that fueled their intentions, and then the integration of social, political, psycho-spiritual, and just mental and emotional consciousness, dog. Like, I think that is the healing. If you have to bottom line it, like, that's the healing work once we have that integrated, which is basically what yoga is saying. Like, I'm not really saying anything new, just more relevant to the demographic I serve and the time in which I'm meant to serve it. But
yes. I'm snapping my fingers.
But that's all yoga is, to yoke the energies together, to yoke understanding. So yeah, man. Yeah.
Well, I can just tell, like I said, when I met you and just working with you and knowing you, like, literally almost a year now, like that, just the fact that work is so synergized with you and your spirit and your, like, it's truly a calling. It just seems very apparent to me. Like, it just seems like, oh, this all makes sense. Like, like the who that you are, like the what that the work is, and the why, like, it's all in line. It all just makes sense. I think that just radiates outwards, and I think folks gravitate towards that.
Is that, again, in the going to the political kind of conversation, like, good if I'm being basic, and not judging the basic, but if I'm being basic and honest, that's intentional too. Like, I have to do the work. So I refuse to be hypocritical. So I have to do the work for myself. And I told y'all that my entry is logic and reason. So I gotta try it on myself before I can
True.
go out here and say it. And I definitely am
So
aware.
you got high on your own supply first.
Yeah, I did. And guess what? The supply, like me wearing it is its own branding. Like,
there you go. That's
like
beautiful.
I do think so. You know, if you see somebody that got high on their own supply and they look smacked, like they don't have to tell you this is some good stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like
That's yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've wrestled with my whole career, because I was a super activist in high school, well, a little bit in high school, but more so in college. And then I got an engineering degree, and I'm like, welp, I literally busted my ass for 4 years in engineering school. I'm gonna go ahead and get a decent job that's gonna like actually, you know, whatever. But X number of years, over a decade later, like I felt like that work was somewhat hypocritical in the sense that I worked for corporations, and like I know how I feel about capitalism and all this kind of stuff. So like I feel like I haven't made the career synergy as well as you have yet, and it's a journey. It's not a judgment. I used to judge myself a little bit heavy. I used to have moments where I was like really down on myself, like, damn, like I'm working for the man.
No,
but like,
man.
it is what it is. Like, you know, family and all this thing. Life is life, and that's the whole show is like, who knows? It's just life. Like,
Right.
like the whole journey is just that.
Yeah.
And I guess my challenge is to continue to grow as a person within the energy conversation that we had today, but also just making sure that I can synergize all of those parts of life as much as I can to keep myself, you know, sustained and functioning and healthy, but also like mentally and spiritually aligned.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things too. Like, I think us checking ourselves is part of the point too. That's why I named the LLC The Humble Practice. Wow. Like, to make sure I'm constant. Like I did say what I said. Like, you know, like I'm wanting to radiate outwards and stuff. But that's only because, again, it keeps me grounded in the work to keep doing it and stuff. But to your point though, like, and we can use the same type of tactics that we're talking about, you tapping in and doing the work to your divine feminine energy, or like anybody else who's listening who's masculine embodiment, you know, is trying to do the same thing. Anybody who's trying to do any type of work on themselves and starting where you are, holding that with grace, and then trying to integrate from where you are. So like if you're doing corporate, there's ways that they need balance for somebody who's doing the work within those sectors. That's too. True. You know, and I think, and again, going back to levels, perspectives, and intentions, like if you're at a level where you're constantly growing yourself up and your intentions are to constantly do that and be your highest expression. I mean, there is, however you subscribe to that, to anything that's higher than yourself, like there's going to be a natural, like, pulling away into, or let me not even say pulling away, gearing towards something that mirrors that. But until then, like, that's the work, you know. And as long as, like, and there's so many opportunities to show up as your highest self that models what highest self looks like in those interpersonal dynamics within those corporate sectors, you know. That's fair. That people don't get to see if you weren't there.
That's true.
You know. And so I think that's handled with grace, and understanding that we're all living in the matrix. You know,
let's bring it right back to the beginning.
I had to.
When I have a guest, I always close with a few questions. One, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Yeah, okay. I want to be with, like, you know, that do that, like, touch people and, like, just see their whole life type of thing.
Ooh.
Somebody was able to do that. What character was able to do that? They were, like, touching, like, it's in the X-Men, I think. I'm not sure, but it's like...
Oh, that was in a movie I saw. Wait, what was that?
I don't know. But...
Was that in The Witcher?
I've never seen it. So.
Hold on, that sounds very familiar. That wasn't something that I saw, but that's a really cool power, and that I could see that literally helping you do your work easily.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because like your work is really dependent on, or not dependent, but like your work is highly customized and based on the individuals you're working with specifically. So if you could just touch them and see and even feel, that would be intense. But like if you could at least see the chapters and the major reflection points, deflection points, whatever in a person's life, it would give you a heightened ability to do what you do.
Yes, without having to take somebody through re-traumatization, you know,
by even telling a story or
by
whatever.
having to tell it. Yeah.
Yo, that's beautiful. Wow. Yeah, I've never heard that superpower said. Like the most popular one for a while was like flying.
Oh, I definitely want to fly.
I mean, flying is dope. But, like,
can I have two?
Nope, one only. But no, that one is very insightful and applicable. So that's good. All right, the next one is. Oh, this is going to lead to a tangent. What's the last book you read, and do you recommend it?
I'll keep it. And it's kind of on topic, or on par, or at least with this. But The Spirit of Intimacy. Dag, who wrote it?
Oh yeah, you told me. You mentioned that to me.
Yeah, I recommend that for sure. It's a read on the West and how we do intimacy, and it really helped me. I mean, I've been on a huge journey over the last year and some change on healing intimacy within my personal life, because there's definitely a lot of blockages around that in all senses. But this I was in Sankofa and it was just called me, and I was like, it's such an easy read too.
That's what's up. I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
That sounds good. As I was reading the question, I was like, oh. That's going to create a tangent because we're both reading 48 Laws of Power or listening to it, and I've been told and referred to it several times, and I've never done it. When you mentioned it, I was like, if Ryan's reading it, I can read it. And I know you were saying it read with caution.
Yes.
And just the other day, I was like, yo, the narrator is maniacal.
Man,
in the reading of this, he's just sound like, oh, you got to do your impression.
He's like, interpretation of the law.
Yeah, he just be so you have to crush your enemies or else they will forever come back and I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, wear your deception as armor or else you'll be defeated at your best.
Yeah.
What? That's why I wasn't going to recommend it. But it is, I found it the same way. Why have people, it's been recommended. I've heard people say that this changed my life and said it with a smile or said it after creating their own companies and making the bag. I'm just yo, so what is this? Finally dipped into it, and I'm just I did bring it up for you because I knew we could discern it. But if anybody taps into it, please ground down your values.
Right.
Ground down your values and use it with intentions for everything you do. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about too is how a lot of the examples come from European 1800s, maybe Middle Ages type references for these things. So it's this is some of them are from Asia too, but it seems just the vast majority of the examples are from a very finite, very limited perspective on human history.
Yeah.
And I think some of the laws might not even be relevant in other cultural norms, other just societal, socially, or other societal or civilizational worldviews, basically. And a thought crossed my mind: how would the book read differently if it was read by a woman, or rated by a woman? That almost didn't compute for me. I'm this is such a patriarchally read, but it just feels
yeah.
And I was trying to wrap my mind around if a woman was the audiobook reader, because I was struggling around that.
I don't I mean, you know how I feel about the narrator period. I think creates, we just talked about, creates a whole feeling. But yeah, if a woman, I don't know. I don't think it'll be as cringy, but I don't think I would believe it either.
Isn't that crazy?
What
does that say about the text though?
Man, this is definitely, that text is masculine energy 101, but it's not in its highest expression.
It's not divine masculine.
See, and this is where it gets tricky for me though, because I'm glad you touched on that. I'm glad. Dag, I should have said this earlier.
I meant to ask that earlier.
Yeah, there's a different, divine masculinity is not the same as evolved masculinity. You know what I mean? When we talk about divine energies. We're talking about like something that's like literally innate with us, informed by cosmic consciousness, you know,
From the source.
From source.
You mentioned, yeah.
So yeah, it's divine masculinity, but it's in its detriment. It hasn't been. This is when it is feeling every angle of scarce mentality, like when it's not safe and comfortable, when it's not that environment, that container that can breathe that can breathe feminine energy. And so all this whole 48 laws of power is literally like a playbook for how to expel feminine energy. And if that's what we've been doing throughout history, no wonder the women that are referenced when we talk about the historical points embodied their ego, embodied their divine masculinity.
He does reference a lot of women, which was interesting.
He does. I mean, they were cutthroat. Like
that's true.
That's why I told you this is like an esoteric text for Game of Thrones. Was Cersei not that one? Right. You know, like yeah.
Oh yeah. One of the women in there sounded just like Cersei or whoever.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
I forgot you said that.
Yeah. Yes. And so don't sleep. Like women can do it, but to do it means that we're suppressing
the feminine.
This one we didn't even get to
I know.
the women's. But yeah.
We'll do round 2.
Yeah.
All right. So the last question is, as the guest, you get to offer what song you are rocking to right now. What
song? Can I give an artist? Or is that cheating? Okay.
I've done that before, but it's my show.
True.
You can say an artist, but I'm gonna ask if there's a favorite song right now.
Okay. Song. I've been going back. Okay. Okay. I've really been playing Luther Vandross is So Amazing on repeat. I don't know where it's coming from, and I'm being honest because that's what has been happening for the last like week or two, but I'm much still cheap. Anything Tems.
Oh, Tems?
Yes, Tems. I've been rocking
Tems
with
radio is on repeat all day, every day for me.
Yes.
And I think it was my September episode. I picked a particular song off Tems, the EP that had just come out. But yo, Tems radio is like,
man,
that is the vibes.
Yes.
That is the vibes for sure. For sure. I second that. All right, well, that's the show. Ryan, I really appreciate you joining me.
Yes, it's been love. It's been love for sure. Definitely need a part 2.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's if this made sense.
Yeah, no, I definitely think a part 2 is in order. Folks, thanks for listening to this episode of Who Knows It's Just Life. This is your host, Kyle. I want to thank you all for fitting us into the day. Oh, before we go, Ryan, please let the people know how they can reach you, the Humble Practice, and how they can contribute or just become a part of what you're doing.
Yes. So I'm on Instagram. My personal page is Ryan W with 2 underscores, but I also have an Instagram page for the Humble Practice, and it's just at the Humble Practice. And then if you would like to book a discovery call or a storytelling session, well, first it's a discovery call, will lead into the storytelling, then you can visit the IG, and then there's a link to my link tree there, or you can email me at thehumblepractice@gmail.com.
Beautiful. I'm telling you, y'all, hit her up. If you could, just the energy, the exchange right here, like, yeah, this is real. So yeah, I appreciate you. I'm glad you were able to join. And as y'all know, if you want to reach out to me, I'm on Instagram at RealDadult. That's RealDadult. Hope to catch you here next time. Until then, be safe, be well. Peace.
Peace.